name is Kim Smouter. I am the Executive Director of the European Network Against Racism. And it is my pleasure to be joined by Rio and James for this session, where we're going to be talking about macro-level aspects of creating an inclusive digital economy. And we're going to be looking at the role that the tech sector and also tech as tools can play to actually foster this more inclusive digital community. I am very pleased, and I want to just thank essentially Black Tech Fest for having us here today. The European Network Against Racism is partnering in order to ensure that we are able to bring together pan-European anti-racism activism. Thank you. Yes, so now we can actually hear each other, which is much better. So thank you, organizers. So yes, so as I was saying, we are very pleased to be here at the Black Tech Fest. My name is Kim Smouter, Executive Director of the European Network Against Racism. We are partners at the Black Tech Fest because for us it is an anniversary year for the European Network. The European Network Against Racism brings together more than 150 civil society organizations from across Europe, and what we do is essentially fight racism day in and day out across Europe, working together in partnership with our members. And we're delighted to be here at Black Tech Fest. And Black Tech Fest is one of our locations for a very special event, which is the Make Racism History Festival. And across Europe, in 10 different countries, we're organizing events which are commemorating the work of anti-racism activism for the last 25 years. We're celebrating that work and we're discussing the big issues which ensure that in 25 years' time, we're not talking about racism anymore. We're talking about the fact that we are living in a systemically inclusive society. So I'm delighted to be here. Rio and James, thank you for agreeing to join with me on this stage where we're going to be discussing lots and lots of different things. But perhaps we can begin with first allowing the audience to understand who the hell you are. So Rio, perhaps we'll begin with you to do some introductory remarks.
Hi, good morning. So I'm Rio Burt Darby. I work for a company called ENAR. I've been in the tech sector for about 6 years. And I feel like as it pertains to technology, I've done the vast majority of roles that are out there. I started off as a data scientist. Then I was a business analyst, program manager. I've done technology sales. And I've also been a solution architect. Currently now I'm doing advisory consulting within the fintech space. So I work with a lot of the big banks. Most of the household banking names in the UK, at least, I've worked with and for them. And I am particularly keen to see a lot more diversity within the technology sector. One, because it's true to my heart, but I've seen a lot of disadvantage, misrepresentation, and people really affected by, the lack of representation in the industry. But that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Rio. And James?
Good. Thank you. First, thank you very much, Kim, for the work you do. Yeah, it's quite impactful. So my name is James Wainaina. I work for a company called SAP. We are a technology company. We pretty much the largest applications company in the world. My role is as an advisor. So I work with customers, advising them on which kind of solution fits best, specifically within governance, risk, and compliance. I've been in the tech industry for maybe 13 years. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and hope we'll get to hear more about what we do as an organization to just make sure that there's a lot of inclusion in everything that we do. Yeah, thanks.
Super. Well, let's get right into it. We have around 30 minutes in order to have a really hopefully a rich discussion. We'll do our best and also we'll hopefully give some time for the audience as well to ask some questions later on. So we're not forgetting you as well. Perhaps we can begin with actually looking a little bit at the tech sector. So the tech sector has an important role building a digital economy. We're really expecting that to be, in essence, you are the architects of tomorrow's society. And one of the questions which I had for you was really your analysis and your perspective in terms of whether the tech sector, as a sector, is it doing enough in terms of diversity and inclusion? Do you feel that it is actually an inclusive sector right now? So maybe, Rio, we can begin with you.
So in terms of the technology sector as a whole, I think there's a definite consciousness, a definite deliberate attitude to invest more. We've got a lot more festivals, a lot more initiatives, and corporations are seriously taking it serious. The fact that we have these wonderful establishments that we have today, the fact that I have a budget to enable tomorrow's generation to perform and excel, the fact that I have a budget within Avanade to allow minorities to have licenses to fulfill Microsoft certifications and all the rest of it, I think is a testament of the fact that, the world in which we live in is a lot more conducive to diversity within this space.
And James, from your perspective?
I tend to agree with that. And we have to look at the things that were historically a problem, from the pay gap, from the misrepresentation, to the barriers that are within the industry. There's active initiatives to try and make sure that those barriers are brought down. And the barriers would mean that, yes, the recruitment processes is inclusive. And when you're recruited, then you don't also face barriers to do your job. So everybody I think the industry has realized that as long as they take you as a human being, then you are able to perform and excel and achieve the corporate objectives. So I agree with Rico and that, yeah, we have quite a lot of initiatives driven to make sure that it's more inclusive. Yeah.
And do you think so? The tech sector actually is one of the sectors which is at the moment still one of the least well-performing sectors when it comes to diversity indicators. So when it comes to, for example, investment that's being given to, for example, black women, we saw some recent studies where it was 0.06% of investment funding that is actually reaching black women, for example. Do you think that this is something which needs to be dealt with both by companies? So is it more company initiatives that need to happen? Or is it regulatory? Is it time for regulation, to regulatory aspects to come into play in order to force more diversity? Or do you think that the work that's being done at the moment is going to be sufficient for that?
I take it. So I think we're a victim as an industry because we fall under the STEM. And the pipeline, yes, is not as great to demonstrate that there'll be more people in the whole STEM sector. But from a company and organizations acknowledging and knowing that we have to really invest, the attitude, like was mentioned, the attitude is there to get done. But how do we have enough pipeline for people to come into the industry? So be it education, how do we then make sure that as kids are growing up, then they want to get into the STEM, and then they can be represented in STEM more often. So it's a victim because you're a victim of the pipeline, of shortage of STEM skills, and then that is, I think, why the numbers look the way they are.
And I think as well, you've hit a strong nail on the head when it comes to that pipeline, because I even remember when I was at university being told by one of my Nigerian sisters that I'm a phenomenon for being a Caribbean in the university. And if I look back at the cohort of my graduation photos, I was one of about 6 of a cohort of 300. So it means that the pipeline at source isn't really there, and I don't think that's changed a lot more. So whilst there's a lot more awareness, I feel like companies, corporations could be doing a lot more to inspire the next generation, investing in funds, and then we could be cultivating within our communities a lot more diversity in terms of opportunities and options. I think there is an emergence of VCs that are of black ethnicity. However, there's not enough. So I think there's an intersection of all of these different components, but I think education and the lack of representation in education, and it doesn't have to be formative or formal education, it could be alternative forms of education as well, but I definitely think there's a huge deficit there that needs to be plugged into.
Yeah, very good points. I want to actually dig in a bit deeper. So we need that pipeline, but it's not just indeed, of course, having that pipeline coming in, but once the people are there, of course, they need to feel a sense of belonging, they need to feel a sense of inclusivity. So I wanted to talk a little bit about of this panel is because your companies are also part of an initiative which ENAR is leading, which is called Equal at Work, where essentially civil society, anti-racist civil society is working hand in hand with companies to discuss and improve and boost D&I initiatives within companies. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, about how Avanade and SAP, what are you guys doing to make sure that actually once the people are recruited into the company, they're not entering into a place where they're going to be facing microaggressions, they're going to be facing hostile environments, which just inspires them to actually leave the company as quickly as they came in. So yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more about what your lived experiences has been in your companies and how your D&I programs are operating.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think One of the things that we have done is taken a deliberate attitude to empowering the people themselves. Because as we all know, every organization has a deficit of senior leaders at the top that are ethnically diverse. But for us, one of the things that we've done, we've invested heavily into our employee networks. And they are leaders in their own right. So me, myself, I look after our Beyond, which is a multicultural employee network across Europe and the Middle East. I have my own funds to invest in leadership, learning, development programs. We have mentorship programs. One of the things that I have invested in is a thing called Let's Talk, which gives diverse people across the organization the ability to have one-on-one conversations with our CEO. We're a global organization of 60,000, but they can have one-on-one conversations with our CEO. In North America, they've got a version of this called Sisters Unfiltered, which gives black women an opportunity to talk to the highest person in the room in our organization. So we invest heavily in the leadership and learning development opportunities of our people. We invite a number of external speakers to speak and to cultivate the talent. And then also thinking about that future pipeline, working within our ecosystem to make sure that the future generation have learning and training development opportunities that are useful and fruitful.
Yep, true. So just to build on the employee networks, so we have about 44,000 employees participating in employee networks of different ethnicities or different orientations. We have a huge number participating in these employee networks, and this is a big plus. But I think the biggest plus after you get to SAP is the ability to not be identified from the box that you come in. Now you're treated as a human being, and we have a framework called Pledge to Flex, and that framework allows you as a human being to work better. So for example, yes, I am black in SAP, but other than that, I am a father. I have school runs to do. So the framework allows us to agree with your manager that your working hours. You work the same total number of hours, but if you have to be somewhere else, then you have to be somewhere else. I have to go in the morning, drop them to school, pick them up in the evening. I am allowed to literally block my time to be human, to be a father, to be who I need to be able to perform. And I've come to see that every goal that I have had, I shared with my manager, and for the increases or the opportunities presented to me, it's been based on my personal goal. Very personal goal. So I want my child to access this. And then my manager will be like, okay, so how do you think we can make that work? So coming out of that box that I am in SAP, it's all equal. You're equal. Now, what are your personal goals as a human being? The Pledge to Flex framework that is allowing us to work at hours that we feel are convenient to be human is really the biggest plus for our organization, in my view, yeah.
And I love that. I absolutely love that for a number of reasons. I feel like, especially as minorities, or ethnically diverse people, as I like to say instead, we do things a lot earlier. We get married a lot earlier. We have so many commitments outside of work that is sometimes limiting in terms of our career progression. And the fact that the organization can and will appreciate that and factor that in is wonderful.
One question which I have for the both of you is, to what extent for the D&I programs which SAP and which ENAR are running, to what extent is measuring the progress of those programs important? And the reason I ask for this is that across Europe, one of the big pushbacks you often get when you start measuring kind of this information is that, oh, it's illegal, you shouldn't be collecting this information in the first place, and what's it going to be used for, and those types of things. And so I was curious from your angles, what extent is this kind of at least what Europe calls equality data collection? How important is it to ensure that the D&I programs are actually delivering, in a sense, on the promise that we're going to be creating companies which are going to be open to diversity, are going to be appreciative of it, are going to create the opportunities for people to rise up the career ladder, that we're going to be seeing in in 5 years and 10 years, actually black CEOs of these companies? To what extent is equality data collection an important element of that discussion?
Well, I'd say it's, from an Avanar perspective, it's incredibly important. It's at the fabric of our DNA. Obviously, we operate within the boundaries of what is legal. So across Europe, self-ID isn't as accepted as it is in London, for instance, and North America. But where we can collect the data, we leverage it and utilize it in ways to come up with strategic programs. And not all of the data is quantitative. We do qualitative research as well, so we do listening tours. And I remember once we did a global listening tour where we was looking at predominantly Afro-Caribbean or black people and their experiences within the organizations. And where people had articulated that they felt that there was a pay gap, we addressed that gap. We formed a task force to proactively deal with that imbalance. As well as that, all of our executive members across the organization have a diversity framework that they're held accountable to. And that is a part of their performance metrics at the end of the year. So it's something that is ingrained within the DNA of the organization. And in fact, every organization has some version of an NPS. And so for our version of it, we have embedded 6 questions around D&I specifically to measure the experience of the employees as we kind of progress our strategies and initiatives.
I can't answer that after the data scientist. the data scientist really hit the nail on the head. But really, we have to understand that for us, we have to reflect the societies that we operate in. Now, if we cannot measure using data, then I don't know what we'll be aiming at. So yes, there's what you need to collect, and yes, it needs to be used correctly, but it's really going to help us understand the society that we operate in, because we need to match that within the organizations that we have. And I mean, I was thinking SAP operating in over 157 countries. I mean, those are our customers, and for us, we have to have that whole representation in it. And only when you have those figures do you know that, yeah, we actually need full representation. So, yeah, that's what I can say. Yeah.
So I want to open a new chapter of our story, and which is going to be focusing around kind of artificial intelligence. So everybody's abuzz with artificial intelligence. Everybody wants artificial intelligence, etc., etc. One of the things that we at ENAR are certainly highlighting is that we're not against artificial intelligence. We think there's a lot of positive things that can come from artificial intelligence in terms of efficiency gains, in terms of the innovation opportunities and those types of things. But we're also highlighting a lot of concerns, particularly from a racialized perspective in terms of the data sets that are being used for these artificial intelligence systems to learn and to develop and grow. I'd be curious from your perspectives as tech leaders. I can imagine there's a lot of enthusiasm in terms of the adoption of AI, but are your companies also looking at the risks and kind of what are they doing to actually anticipate some of that? And what do you think the tech sector as a whole should be doing to ensure that this does not become a nightmarish situation particularly for us as black people?
I'm gonna start. My background was data science, and I say was, I've not done it for 6 years, so I'm loosely qualified. But there is a quote that I'd like to quote. I can't remember who said it, somewhere in the 17th century or thereabouts, but it was, humans are endowed with a will and ability to take a deliberate attitude towards the world and lend it significance. So we're cultural beings. As we live and see the world and experience the world, that shapes what we superimpose on it. And the same is when it comes to data and data collection and the methods that are used. So whilst I'll say data scientists aren't necessarily inherently racist, their experience can in turn cause bias, right? Because all data science is the analysis of prior data. So if the data that you've collected doesn't have representation in it, you're going to superimpose bias when you're doing prediction. And so there are tons of ways to mitigate it. 1, to be educated, the data scientist. 2, to think of tuning parameters, lambdas, and all the rest of it. And 3, to really ingrain this ethos of risk and philosophy and safety when you're doing data science. So one of the things that we have invested in within Avanar is a chief intelligent AI officer. His title, these corporate titles nowadays. Florin Rota. And he is big on ethics in artificial intelligence, the metaverse, and all the rest of it.
Um, how do you remember such a long quote? I mean, really. Anyway, so yeah, AI, it really exciting, and we actually use it internally, and one of our networks actively tested to see if it had any bias. Now, from all our testing, the descriptive AI seems pretty diverse, and that's all going well. Now, the image AI is another thing. Now, because when you're speaking of AI and asking it to generate a lawyer, it might generate a male who is probably white, and a nurse, it will generate with bias. So in terms of the imagery side, there's a lot to be done. But in terms of the descriptive side, we've really achieved a lot of diversity. And of course, when you're using AI, then you have to use the correct prompts. So even us as employees and as users of AI, we need to prompt correctly so that then the information you get is not offensive to you. And prompting correctly is I won't just ask for a lawyer, I will ask for an African lawyer or a female lawyer. So prompt engineering in itself is a skill nowadays. So when going into AI, we have to do that. But I think AI, in a utopia perspective, I think will help humans unite, because we have to be against the machines one day.
Okay.
So I think it's going to bring us together one day, because we have to.
So the future won't be an inclusive digital economy, it'll just be the matrix.
It will be the humans versus the machine.
Okay, Terminator. Gentlemen, maybe because I'm seeing the kind of time clicking onwards, a question kind of as leaders in your companies, as racialized leaders in your companies, do for those who kind of are thinking about potentially a career in tech or considering are going to be working for companies where potentially there will be often a minority. One of the questions which I think we discussed was very much kind of what positioning should you have in those companies? Do you think it's important for us as black people working in these companies to be militant? Do you think actually we should find a way to assimilate with the mainstream? What do you think in this day and age? Because I know that also D&I programs are currently facing a bit of a backlash to a certain extent in certain companies. I don't think in your companies, but in other companies for sure. How should a racialized person evolving in these companies position themselves? Should they be bringing their full real self? Should they be bringing something different? I was curious kind of how you guys have been navigating, in essence, these corporate worlds and these corporate spaces.
So I think bring 90% of yourself. So I'm never going to bring the barbershop version of myself into the office, but you'll get at least 90% of who I am. I think it's also important to take ownership. Take ownership of your career. And also, as you're more junior in your career, take every opportunity as it comes. But also, if someone gives you an opportunity, ask why. And ask why 5 times. And you'll get to the reason behind why they're actually presenting that opportunity. Because the last thing you want to do is to end up in a situation where you're stuck. You can't progress. You can't go any further. You hit a glass ceiling. So definitely seize the opportunity to move around, do as many different things, try as many different things, ask questions, be proactive. Within Avanade, I moved around 7 times. I've been in a company for 6 years, but I've had horizontal moves, I've had vertical moves. Just keep moving around until you discover what is right for you. And also, it's okay to have mentors. Have a diversity of mentors. I have mentors that are internal, external, mentors that look like me, mentors that don't look like me, mentors that are women, mentors that are younger. Like, have as many different people feeding into you as much as you possibly can, because the greatest thing about advice is that you don't have to listen to it, but when someone gives you a nugget, it could be a wonderful nugget that can take your career leaps and bounds.
So I'm enjoying listening to you. So the tone at the top, you have an opportunity to choose your organization and then check the values of the organization. And when the values of the organization resonate to you or with you, then everything you do and every barrier that you face, you can advocate for the value of the company. So it's not being militant. It's not being forceful. You're not fighting. You know that the organization embraces different thought. So if somebody challenges how you're thinking, it's not about me when I enforce the fact that the company actually wants me to think this way. Yeah. So there's something that is, just remember that the organization supports you, the organization is behind you, and you just find yourself influencing people because you can actually quote. Like I remember I have something that we had a town hall, and one of our board members actually said, please have lunch with somebody you would never have lunch with. Yeah. So I would pick Rico any day. Yeah. But I have to pick somebody else to have lunch with, and then just get to know them. And when we connect at that level, then you're able to see people as humans and understand and appreciate their perspectives and their history, which might be the reason they are making or enforcing a particular decision at that time. So socialize, network, and build on the fact that the company supports you, and then, yeah, go for it.
So we've spoken a lot about kind of the role that tech can play in terms of fostering a digital inclusive economy. We've spoken about the tools as well and whether they are going to be helping us or not helping us. One of the topics I wanted to bring as well here is what role do you see, for example, governments playing in actually making this a reality moving forward? Do you see things that the government should be doing more of in order to actually create an enabling environment for us to flourish, but also for companies to be held accountable? Or would you see something different being done at the government level?
No, this was tricky. I think when it comes to governments certainly need to invest in strategic programs to target minorities across the board, and technology is one of the areas, especially because we've got such a high and huge deficit in that space. But I think there needs to be an intersection, so you can't have legislation which is discriminatory necessarily, because what you end up with is an inefficient system where you don't necessarily have the right pool of talent. But there needs to be a mechanism to how organizations not so much hit their quota per se, because you've got to think about diversity as a proportion of the population that you sit in, right? But definitely giving them the tools and the investment to make sure that their organizations can hit any apprenticeship schemes, hit any colleges and universities, and so on and so forth. And that could be, because some of the brightest schools are, some of the brightest students and pupils live in some of the most deprived areas. So it could be thinking about investing heavily in those communities, tech centers, innovation hubs, and so on and so forth, but being very, very deliberate about targeting those communities, and that should see much of the disadvantage that we see go away.
So sometimes I feel the government, yes, is open, but then there are barriers. Yeah, and these are the barriers that we need to bring down. And I'll speak from trying to get talent locally and also trying to get talent, foreign talent from anywhere. And the amount of cost that an organization has to meet in terms of government required fees, it is a barrier in itself. Yeah. So while there's openness, the fact that organizations have to keep investing and investing, I'm not sure. I'm not an expert in taxes or benefits that organizations get from the government, but I think that the government should have their skin in the game and say, okay, to go to that area with talent but is deprived with investment, the government should probably do more than expecting the organization to do it. But the good thing is organizations are happy to do it anyway. Yeah. So I think we're just bringing down barriers if possible, and then that's it.
Yeah, it's really important that partnership work in essence to bring together. I'm going to warn the audience that we're going to actually have time for one or two questions. So if one of you have any questions, please raise your hand and somebody will come and bring you the mic. To kind of conclude from our side, and then we'll give the audience kind of an opportunity to ask any questions they may have. We are celebrating Make Racism History at ENAR, and we want everyone to be involved. So I'd love for you to be involved and to tell me kind of what would be one thing that you think is needed to make racism history in the context of the digital economy. we were waiting for you with a bated breath, James.
I'm trying to think. One thing And this is utopic. When do we see each other as humans instead of the box that we fit in? And that point is when I think we will eliminate this racism. When I appreciate that a white male growing up, who's my colleague, has grown up being told you're racist. And he is not, but he's being told that. And I've grown up hearing that I could face racism, and I have to look at my colleague as a human being. And I think that takes effort, that takes understanding culturally. I have to understand how my colleague speaks. He may be too direct for my culture. He's not being offensive. So there's a lot of understanding and connection that we need to have as humans to eliminate this racism issue.
And I think on the back of humanity, I think understanding our difference, right? Celebrating our difference in ethnicity, gender, race, even age. When I can step in a corporation, a tech organization, because they're dominated by key players that have worked in the same organizations for years and years, friends. But when they can celebrate the diversity of all of those areas that I mentioned, and everyone's voice is equal, truly, truly equal, that's when we can say we've got progress in that space.
Fantastic. So we've given a bit of time for the audience to think about their questions, and I saw that a hand got raised. So please, your question, and please don't forget to introduce yourself so that we know who you are.
Okay, hello, my name is Tosin. I came in yesterday for the event. So my question goes like this. How do you, as a staff or a team member, you're not in leadership, how do you ensure that you don't come in? Because most of the time, just like James said, you step into a room already, like without it just pops into your head and black. And you can already just filter the room with color, hair, something. You now look for maybe the black person in the room to go talk to first before you now move around. So how do you step into an organization, into a room, or even your fellow colleagues? How do you relate with them without that filter? And also, if they come up with you with that filter, because sometimes we may have conversations and you have something going on in your head you want to say, but it comes off in a laid-back way culturally, but the other person doesn't get it. Maybe they feel insulted or something. So how do you come into that space without creating that bias and creating a barrier between you and others, and also ensuring that we're the same, we can be diverse and not be different, and we can relate well and encourage growth, so that you don't create that you don't create barriers around you and with people that you work with, or whether you're going up or you're going across the organization. Thank you.
So Tosin, that was an absolutely wonderful question. I think there's multiple layers that I love. I think in the first instance, your integrity is so important. Whenever you step into a room, you own the version of who you are. It's very, very important, despite people's level. I don't care if you're a janitor, I don't care if you're the CEO, you're going to get introduced to me. I'm going to introduce you to me as me. Like I remember a senior person once said to me, I need to change the way that I talk, and I said, it's not going to happen. But we're good friends now. So I think that's incredibly important. I think about outcomes as well. So every person that you interact with, think about who they are, what they could be, and think about an outcome that you want to derive out of that conversation or that encounter, and how that relationship could benefit the two of you in the future. That's how I would tackle those kind of situations. And in terms of your difference, could be a different accent or whatever it is, the way that you talk, embrace it. Embrace who you are. If they don't embrace you, then perhaps that's not the kind of relationship you should be having.
James.
Just remember the organization is behind you. Now, depending on the values of the organization, you're here and the organization supports you. So as long as anytime I feel in doubt and then I remember, I remember the corporate values. So when I'm on the table, I base everything based on the values of the organization, and I don't get to feel any less, because we are all here for the organization, and the organization is bigger than all of us. So that's how I look at things, and that's how I'd suggest you base your thinking from. Yeah.
James, Rio, it's been a fantastic conversation with you. Thank you so much for joining me this morning to talk about how we foster a more inclusive digital economy. Thank you to the audience for the questions that you've raised. I know there were some which were still waiting to be asked, but I suggest that we can look at them from the side and discuss that a bit more. Thank you very much for being here. The European Network Against Racism also thanks Black Tech Fest for hosting us. If you're interested in understanding more about Equal at Work and the companies that we work with, come to our website. We have lots of information and also lots of practical guidance that help organizations to be more inclusive and create a more sense of belonging. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.